The history of New Orleans and that of the Catholic Church in Louisiana is close, mutually beneficial, and long. Priests connected with the Seminary of Foreign Missions in Paris worked among the Native Americans of Lower Louisiana in the late 1600s and early 1700s, giving the area that would one day be New Orleans its first Catholic inhabitants. By the 1720s, enslaved people from Africa would form another significant group of Catholics. In 1718, Sieur de Bienville, the father of Louisiana, had plans laid out for the city, which provided for a church and a presbytery in the new parish of St. Louis. Established in 1720, but divine services were held only in impoverished and inadequate quarters until April 1727, when the first substantial St. Louis parish church was finally completed, designed by a French military engineer. The arrival of the French-speaking Acadians, tragically expelled from Nova Scotia in the mid-1750s, was a blessing for the colony of Louisiana and a gain for the Catholic Church. In 1727, the first of the famed Ursuline nuns arrived to help educate the residents of the new colonial capital. In 1752-53, the Ursulines moved into their new convent, now the oldest building in the Mississippi Valley. In 1769, Spanish troops took control of New Orleans and the Louisiana Territory, which was ceded to Spain by the Treaty of Fontainebleau. Church affairs in New Orleans was greatly influenced by the Spanish colonial government. The first Diocese of Louisiana and the Floridas was created in 1793. The parish church in use since 1727 was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1788. And a new structure, the future Cathedral of St. Louis, was completed in 1794. Although heavily renovated several times, it remains substantially the same building, still in use as the cathedral and still the heart of the old French Quarter of New Orleans. In December 1964, it would become a minor basilica. An all-night vigil before Our Lady of Prompt Succor was held at the Ursuline Convent Chapel behind St. Louis Cathedral before the Battle of New Orleans. Andrew Jackson personally thanked the nuns for their prayers at the Thanksgiving service, a Te Deum held in St. Louis Cathedral following the U.S. victory over the British at the Battle of New Orleans on January 8, 1815. From 1801 to 1815, New Orleans was without a bishop, and a series of quarrels led to conflicts and near schism in the diocese. On September 24, 1815, Father Francis William Dubois was consecrated in Rome, and Louisiana finally had a bishop after an interim of nearly 15 years. However, the new bishop set his headquarters in St. Louis, upriver from New Orleans, and supervised from a distance. A significant event during this period was the arrival of the Sisters of Charity to staff the Poydras Asylum in New Orleans. It was the first of numerous educational, social, and healthcare facilities in Louisiana, including Hotel Dieu, the famous charity hospital of the city. The Diocese of New Orleans covered the entire state and had a total population approaching 300,000, served by 26 churches and 27 priests, when Antoine Blanc became fourth bishop on November 23, 1835. Bishop Blanc established Assumption Seminary on Bayou Lafourche, 2 colleges, 9 academies and schools, 4 orphanages, a hospital, and a home for girls. The Sisters of the Holy Family was founded by a free African-American woman, Henriette de Lilly, in 1842. It was a community committed to teaching, caring for orphans, and tending to elderly African Americans. The Code Noir, the French law which governed the treatment of slaves, mandated that slaves be instructed and baptized in the Catholic faith, freed from work on Sunday, and treated humanely. In 1833, St. Patrick's Church is dedicated to serve the growing Irish population of New Orleans. Germans from the Catholic areas of Germany were also arriving in the city. In 1836, while abroad recruiting priests and religious for his diocese, Blanc persuaded the Father General of the Jesuits in Rome to release 8 members of the society for service in Louisiana, guaranteeing the return of a Jesuit presence in the area after nearly 3/4 of a century's absence. The Jesuits took charge of Sacred Heart Church and Parish, which embraced a wide territory in the western part of the diocese. The Jesuit fathers opened the College of the Immaculate Conception in 1849. In 1850, Pope Pius IX raised New Orleans to the rank of an archdiocese and created the province of New Orleans, which included all of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Texas, and part of Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. This vast territory would be slowly whittled down over time until only the state covered by the Archdiocese of Louisiana was left. In 1843, one of the worst epidemics of yellow fever to ever sweep the area killed priests, nuns, and members of the parish of New Orleans. The famous cemeteries of St. Louis overflowed and new ones were created for the dead from the fever. The Civil War years were difficult for the church in New Orleans, with disruptions of service and the destruction of church property in many areas of the archdiocese. At least 5 of the city's priests are known to have left to serve as chaplains with the Confederate Army. There was rebuilding and growth during the years following the Civil War, but this left the church deeply in debt. Adding insult to injury, in 1893, a severe hurricane swept the area, decimating the area and causing suffering throughout much of the archdiocese. In February 1898, the new archbishop was concerned about the archdiocese's debt and ordered an annual contribution of 12% of the revenues of each parish for 5 years. This measure eventually liquidated the long-standing debt, although it aroused the displeasure of some pastors who felt the money should remain closer to the parishes. In 1895, St. Catherine Parish was established as the first parish in New Orleans for African Americans. In September 1904, the Jesuits started a small college in New Orleans, which in 1911 was merged with the College of the Immaculate Conception and became Loyola University, receiving state charter as a university in 1912. St. Mary's was the normal school for women religious engaged in teaching in the archdiocese. In time, St. Mary's Dominican College became an accredited Catholic women's college. Catholic elementary and high schools throughout the archdiocese were staffed by nuns and fathers. In September 1923, the Notre Seminary opened and was staffed by the Mariist Fathers. In 1912, the first committee and the first superintendent of Catholic Charities was established, just in time for a horrific hurricane to hit New Orleans in 1915, and the entry of the United States into World War I in 1917 swept up many of the Catholic citizens of the New Orleans Archdiocese. The people in the story of New Orleans are as interesting as the city itself. For more than 221 years, a multi-ethnic population of faithful clergy and religious have persevered and nurtured the Catholic faith by establishing parishes, schools, orphanages, hospitals, and other institutions. The faithful population consists of French, Spanish, Irish, Germans, Acadians, Canary Islanders, Native Americans, slaves, free people of color, Italians, Hungarians, Cubans, and Vietnamese in the 20th century, and of course, Americans. The women religious have played an important role with their contribution to Catholic Louisiana. In 1727, the Ursulines arrived to minister at the French Royal Hospital and begin the formal education of young girls and women. The famous Filles à la Casquette, recruited in France to become wives in the French colony, were looked over by the Ursuline nuns. In the first half of the 19th century, more religious communities were recruited to serve in Louisiana. The Daughters of Charity, Sisters of Mount Carmel, School Sisters of Notre Dame, Sisters of St. Joseph, Sisters of the Good Shepherd, and the Dominican Sisters. They educated girls and boys, young women, and men from all walks of life, rich and poor, slave and free. They tended and comforted the dying. Many individuals of note served in Louisiana. When singling out people of importance to New Orleans Catholic history, one must start with the man who gave the city its start, Sieur de Bienville. Known as the Father of Louisiana, it was Bienville who chose the site in which the history of the Catholic Church unfolded. Capuchin Father Raphael de Luxembourg established the colony's first formal school in 1725, the beginning of a long and distinguished history of Catholic education in Louisiana. Étienne Bernard Alexander Viel, 1736 to 1821, was the first Louisiana native to be ordained a Catholic priest. He was an educator and a published Latin poet. Father Dagobert de Longueuil died on May 31, 1776, after 33 years in Louisiana, most of that as pastor of St. Louis Church in New Orleans. Fray Antonio Moreno Ernez, a native of Spain, was a guiding force in Louisiana until his death in 1781. He was a friend and confidant of much of the population of New Orleans. Louis Pelneverie y Cardenas was appointed to be the first bishop of Louisiana by the King of Spain. He arrived in New Orleans in 1795. Archbishop Antoine Blanc, 1792 to 1860, led the archdiocese through the turbulent antebellum period. He took control of St. Louis Cathedral from the church wardens and established the first seminary. Mother Henrietta Diaz de Leville was a black Catholic nun from New Orleans who founded the Sisters of the Holy Family in 1836 and then served as their first Mother Superior. Today, the Sisters are the second oldest surviving congregation of African American nuns. Father Isidore Francois Turgis served as chaplain to the New Orleans Guards Battalion and later the 30th Louisiana Regiment during the Civil War. He served on the battlefield at Shiloh and in the hospitals throughout the South, staying with his men until war's end. Father Francis Xavier Silos, 1819 to 1867, after a long career of ministry, came to New Orleans to minister to victims of yellow fever. He then died after contracting the disease in 1867. In 2000, the Catholic Church beatified Father Silos, making him one step away from sainthood. Many miracles are attributed to his intercession both during his life and after his death. His shrine is at St. Mary's Assumption Church in New Orleans. In 1910, Father Pete Winhoven opened the St. Vincent de Paul Society's Hotel and Free Labor Bureau to house and find employment for New Orleans homeless men. Within 5 years, they had helped find employment for over 10,000 men. Mother Catherine Drexel's Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament opened Xavier High School in 1915. A teachers' college was later opened, which became Xavier University. Today, it is the largest predominantly African-American Catholic university in the United States. These are some of the thousands of men and women who have served the Catholic Church and all the people of New Orleans.